What is up, everybody? It's the Don with the Don Tech, and today I wanted to go over the special custom cables from BitFenix, in particular the Alchemy 2.0 CSR series, what they come with, how they're different, and whether or not I find them to be worth it. So let's go ahead and open up the box, and let's get rid of the box. This is a trick I learned in school. Okay, roll up the sleeves. Okay, actually let's turn it this way. Get a really good grip on the panels. You go 1, 2, 3. Did it work? I think it worked. Dang it, it didn't work. So as you would expect with any cabling kit that you would buy, they're going to give you everything you need. You've got your PATA/Molex, SATA, the 24 pin, you've got 2 of those, I'll get to that in a second, the PCI Express for the graphics cards, and the 4+4 for the CPU. They also generously include an extension here for a old floppy to Molex connection if you need to use it, and we're not going to need this, so I'm just going to toss it. And they give you 5 of these cable straighteners, tie. It's not a tie, but it's, you put them, I'll demonstrate it in a minute, but you put these on the cable and you can cut these to length, and that will help straighten it or run it in a specific way if you want to do that. Something that I really like about this kit, and they do it with every single thing that they give you that they can do it with, is you can see right here, they've got, if I can hold that up correctly, it says PATA X2, and that means that there are 2, I'll open this up, 2 leads for the actual connection. So this part goes into the power supply itself, if that will show up. There we go. That part goes into the power supply itself, and then you have the 2 leads right here for the Molex strands. And likewise, they do it here. This is a PATA ×3, so this has 3 leads. And so they give you a good amount for those, which is fantastic because sometimes you don't need to connect 4 devices and you just want to get that 1 device. And unfortunately, on that note, they don't give you something that just has 1 strand. The SATA has a, what is it? I think every single SATA has 2 or 4. So you have 2 2s and 2 4s for the SATA. So 2 is fine because it's still going to be thin enough to lead wherever you want to lead it to. Don't need those anymore. The next one here that I want to talk about is the CPU power itself. You have 2, this isn't going to show up because of where the wires are at, you have 2 4+4 CPUs. And the reason you get 2 of them is because sometimes a motherboard, or a really, really high-end motherboard, will have the ability to connect an additional 4-pin CPU power to help with its overclocking abilities or its stability to get that extra power and voltage to it. Not a lot of them have it. The next cables to talk about are going to be these 5 PCI Express cables themselves. And these come in a couple of different variations. Depending on which graphics card you have, you're going to have either a 6-pin, 8-pin, 6+8-pin, 6+6, 8+8, all sorts of different configurations. So you've got this side right here to my right. This is going to actually connect into the into the actual power supply, and that just does not want to cooperate with me and focus. And over here you've got a 6+2-pin, and this is just a single strand with this wire. And that's fantastic because if you only have that 1 power connection, it streamlines everything and it's super slick and super smooth feeling. The final cable to get to today is going to be the ATX 24 pin for the motherboard itself. And they have 2 different types of variations, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. But the 24 pin themselves, they're slightly different, where you can only use 1 of them for the particular power supply that you have. And this one right here that's out of the box, this one is actually for the, as you can see the tag right here, the RMI and the RMX series. And that has a couple of extra pins on the part that goes into the actual power supply itself. So you have to make sure that you have the proper power supply, otherwise it won't fit. And that helps maximize capabilities and compatibilities so they can sell this kit as is without you having to worry about hunting down the correct cable. But it also lets you use the same kit that you purchased for $80 on more than 1 computer. On 2 computers if you have these slightly different variants of the power supply. And I just happen to have, as I reviewed in my previous video, the RMX series of the power supply, so I needed this cable specifically. And this other one here, this will be working for all the other series, the non-I and the non-X of any Corsair series that this actual cable kit will work with. So switching gears, I wanted to talk about the differences between the cable types that I have on hand. And starting with the 24-pin ATX connections that I have for the standard Corsair power supply that comes with any power supply you buy, and the BitFenix one in comparison. And starting off with the, I guess, length test itself, you can see that there's little bit more length. If I line them up here, maybe a few inches, a couple millimeters, stuff like that. Nothing too significant, but you know, it's a difference nonetheless. But primarily what you're getting these cables for is the aesthetic look. And I mean, you can see this. This is one giant thick shrink wrap tube around it, shrink wrapped around the sides here, giving it a really big bulky look, and just traditional black cabling coming out of it, the standard stuff that you would get. So you know what you're dealing with if you have these sort of things. So it just obviously doesn't look anything fancy. The BitFenix one, however, itself, you know, is much nicer, custom sleeved. Obviously, it's much thicker and everything like that. As you can see up here, I've actually been working on doing some of the cable combs themselves, getting those in there and kind of seeing what they look like. And it definitely would be pretty nice with cable combs. Up top is a plastic piece, and then the bottom is a rubberized piece that came with the actual power supply cables themselves. But it's definitely something that gives you a good amount of bend, gives you a good amount of wiggle room. The biggest gripe that I do have about any of these cables, and I don't know if this is solved with a CableMod or something like that, but these stupid pesky wires that have two of them. And this is for, I mean, I don't know exactly which power this is for, but this is going to both, if you can see that here, this is going to both the leads that go into the power supply itself. And obviously, you know, because of how Corsair makes these, they have to do that, but it'd make a lot more sense if they made them split down here at the bottom or something, because otherwise you have to take these two cables and try to fit them inside of this sleeving, which kind of works, but there's not enough space. They're not meant to have two in there all the time. They're meant to have one cable sitting, because otherwise you just have this guy kind of flaily coming out, loosely coming out and everything. And it just really hurts the overall aesthetic, because the RMX series that I'm using my cable with, this is the non-RMX series, it's missing the tag, and my cable has, I think, 3 or 4 of those double cable sections, double cable cables, if that makes sense. And that made trying to use the cable combs on that an absolute nightmare. It did not work. The cables were constantly becoming loose, and whenever I try to bend it, it would bring the cables far too close together, because just those few cables, you want them all to be uniform, so you just have those few cables that are moving, it's going to cause just a really weird look. And it's not just on one side either, it's on both sides with these cables. And so that was a really big negative in my book for the 24 pin. And alternatively, I think that if you can buy these custom sleeved from like CableMods or something like that, where they build them to order, what they do is before they actually put the caps on for these, is they can put on some very good cable combs that wrap around the cords and bring the cords together. They don't really have that much of a gap between them, as you see here, and just kind of really brings them together. So next time, if I ever get CableMod cables to test with, that's what I'll end up using and get that really, really sleek look, because this, I fear, will prevent you from being able to do it. The rubberized ones are pretty good at the bottom, like I said. The plastic ones that I bought off eBay, those are way too, they move way too much. So I fear that those would come out or would not be able to keep the placement as easily. And the next cables that I have here, they're going to be the 3 different type of cables that I actually have on hand for the SATA connections. So we've got the Corsair standard, the Corsair custom that I've also been using in the machine behind me, and the BitFenix ones that are in this review. This main comparison is between the Corsair cables and the BitFenix cables. And the Corsair ones are actually thicker of a cable. Not only do they have the black up here, which the BitFenix ones do not, they're just the colors themselves, they're thicker wires, and they're a little bit more rigid, which is funny. They're rigid, but I guess they don't stay as easily. So let me bend both of these and then just kind of see what happens here. So they're rigid, but they don't stay as easily, because you can see BitFenix is almost bent completely down still. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, they definitely are great cables and they look nice, and it's just going to matter if, you know, you want to go with these, and if your cabling will actually support it. Your cabling structure, sorry, because these, since they're kind of at that right angle bend is what I'll call these, you have to, if you have drives close together, you have to really mush them together. And you can kind of see in my very extensive testing here, it's not the easiest to do. You have to really bend the cables down, and this thickness right here, this black thickness around the actual tips of them, that really hurts it. Hurts the flexibility and hurts the movement that you have with this on all the sides, because you can really only safely bend it to there. And maybe that's a precaution so you don't actually damage the connections, but I don't see why, if you properly make them, it's not going to cause any damage no matter how you use them. But onto the actual ones themselves for the BitFenix. This is a four SATA lead, and these are all going in their own different direction. So the great part about these is they definitely fold up nicely, which is great. So in my computer that I'm using right now, that I'm putting these things in, I'm using a 2-power lead, and that allows me to do exactly this essentially, just with 2 of them instead of 4. I can compress them all together, have this plugged into the power supply, have my fan controller and my SSD very close together without having to worry about the cables just extendedly going anywhere. So that was a nice surprise and something that I really like for my intentions and purposes with it. But I would recommend these probably over the Corsair ones, and I'll get to that in just a second. So a quick list of the pros and cons between all these different types of cables. The BitFenix ones, the biggest con I can see with that, as I've kind of mentioned, is the way that they bend and the way that they really feel. And the dual color isn't really sitting that well with me. I think I wish I would have gone with just straight white instead of the white and black mix. I didn't intentionally go for the white and black mix. It's just that that was the only one they had available when I was trying to buy the cables. The white one was out of stock with no indication that it was going to come back in stock. And of course now it's in stock. But aside from that, the price can't be beat. That whole kit cost me about 76 bucks. And as you saw earlier, it came with all those different connections and enough to build 2 computers if I just slightly alter the power supply. The Corsair ones, however, when you buy the kit of Corsair, it will come with enough of the regular cords, so all the cords except the ATX power cord, so you can do 2 builds as well. And it was about $70, I think, for that kit. And then you had to buy the 24-pin ATX kit afterwards, though. So that was kind of the bummer. You had to pay for that extra. And that itself was going to be an extra $25 to $35, depending on which one you had gotten. So overall, like I said, I would heavily recommend that you do pick up a kit of these if you want to get something for, you know, the customized way of doing things. It always adds that nice extra touch of flair when you're working on a build, to just be able to add that color, sync everything, make it all come together. And if you see in the computer behind me, you know, I've got the red cables there. You don't see a lot of them, but it's just that nice little accent piece. It's an expensive accent piece, but those of you with wives understand accent pieces can be expensive. And I've also never tried the CableMod cables, so I'd be really curious to see how those compare. And if I ever do get my hands on just a cable of that or an entire set of that, I'll definitely add it into the comparison to see how they all stack up. And if you have any experience with them and you like them or anything like that, leave me a comment down below. If you have any questions or you want any more details on those, let me know in the comments down below as well. I'll also link in the description to the product that I purchased from Newegg itself for these cables. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like if you liked it, give it a dislike if you disliked it, or if you just want to use the standard black cables that come with your power supply and do not like creativity. Subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future, and thank you for watching. And remember, the Don's got your back.